Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. This civ overview is going to cover the last of the Age of Conquerors civilizations that I haven't done yet, and that's the Aztecs. They're considered one of the most aggressive early civilizations, with bonuses that help you jump quickly into the game and get your military out before your opponent, which I think is a big part of the reason why they're a bit of a pro player favorite on Arabia. I know lots of people have been waiting to take a look at them, so let's check them out. The team bonus is that their relics generate 33% more gold. Now normally relics give 30 gold per minute, so for Aztecs and their allies that means it's 40 gold per minute. To get a sense of it on bigger scales, that's an extra 100 gold every 10 minutes, or 600 for every hour of gameplay. That's just for a single relic too. As a team bonus, that means if your team together manages to grab all 5 relics on a map, collectively you'd be getting 3,000 more gold per hour than you normally would. It's probably most significant though in 1 vs 1 games, since you won't have access to trade partners and late game gold is otherwise pretty hard to come by. Now to take a look at their personal civilization bonuses, the first is that their villagers carry an extra 5 resources before they have to drop them off. To figure out the impact of this bonus in the early game, I ran some tests of how their collection rate compares to a generic civilization in the Dark Age. The first thing that jumps out is the farming rate, which is much better. It's pretty much on the same level as getting wheelbarrow, which I've noted for the Aztecs before in a video on farming rates. In fact, the conclusion of that video was that Aztecs are by far the best farmers before the new HD expansion civilizations. Looking at the wood collection, it doesn't seem to be affected very much at all. Of course, this is assuming the lumber camp is right up against the wood line, which isn't always going to be the case. If the wood line is further away, we see a larger effect of the Aztecs' extra carry capacity. Just to prevent any misconceptions here, this doesn't mean they're collecting faster when the camp is further from the wood line, it just means the penalty to their collection rate isn't as bad as it is for other civilizations, so they're less hurt by it. On the other hand, civilizations with faster collection rates are disproportionately affected by longer walking distances, and maybe surprisingly, Celts with their 15% faster wood cutting bonus only collect wood about 6% faster than Aztecs when the trees have 3 tiles between them and the lumber camp. The gold and stone collection rates are also improved a little bit, but since the walking distance tends to be fairly small, most of that's probably coming from a bit of reduced bumping and traffic back and forth. I also saw a pretty notable effect size for this bonus when hunting deer a ways away from a mill, mostly because 3 Aztec villagers can take all of the food from a deer, instead of having to make a trip back and leaving a bit of food to rot. We'd expect no effect if you hunt deer with groups of 4 villagers, since then the Aztecs wouldn't get to use their extra carry capacity at all. So it's fair to say for this bonus that it depends on how you're taking the food from the deer. The only downside to the bonus I ran into is that the more carry capacity also means they aren't dropping off what they're gathering as quickly, and in general I find I have to do significantly more manual drop-offs from sheep early on just to keep villagers coming out. Some people might be in the habit of force dropping off resources anyway, but if you aren't in that habit yet, it's something to keep an eye on to prevent idle town center time, especially when you're playing as the Aztecs. The next bonus is that their military units are created 15% faster. Personally, I'd have worded it as 17.6% faster or 15% less time, but it's really not a big deal. The bonus itself is actually pretty awesome, because it's not that far off having the Goth, Briton, and Celt team bonuses all wrapped up in one, as well as a few new ones for monks and warships. Plus, they can still benefit from those other civilizations' team bonuses to make for even faster recruiting times. I find it's really easy to underestimate this sort of bonus that applies to a variety of different strategies. You don't necessarily notice it, but it's probably helping you out in every game. The difference in recruiting times for individual units may only be a few seconds each, but that adds up pretty quickly, especially in the early game when you only have a few military buildings or docks, and slight military advantages have a tendency to snowball. This bonus also contributes to a small exploit that lets you create units from super speed barracks. If Aztecs convert a Goth post-Imperial barracks, it retains its speed boost from their perfusion technology and team bonus. Plus, it also gets the Aztecs' extra 15% military recruitment bonus on top of that. In Forgotten Empires, if you have an Italian ally, that lets you create condottieros in 2.8 seconds each, though that's more of a fun trivia fact than anything to base a strategy around. Their next bonus is that their monks get plus 5 hit points for every monastery technology you research. With 10 techs in total, that's a lot of HP, especially when one of them adds 15 HP as its effect anyway. After all of the techs possible, Aztec monks end up with 95 HP overall. That's more than 3 times the baseline and more than double of any other civilization's monks. The real question though is, what does that mean in-game? Well, it means fully upgraded Aztec monks can take a direct siege onager hit, whereas every other civilization's monks die just to a regular old onager shot. An Aztec monk even has a roughly even chance of converting an onager before it can kill him, and 9 times out of 10, an Aztec monk can convert a close-range mangonel. Remember though, that's after all the techs, so in a Castle Age monk rush, they'd only be slightly above average, depending on how much you prioritize your monastery technologies. In terms of converting some other units, against Persian paladins starting 9 tiles away, Mongol, Persian, Viking, and Berber monks convert them about 10% of the time, whereas civilizations with the Sanctity tech, giving them an extra 50% HP, convert about double that, to around 20% of the time. Aztecs are just less than double that HP, but this time it jumps to a 60% conversion rate in that scenario. Of course, that kind of effectiveness doesn't scale up in bigger fights, since it's much harder to micromanage monks than other military units, but the point still stands that charging monks converting your units is generally a bad idea against the Aztecs. Their last civ bonus is that their villagers get Loom for free. Now this is a great bonus for 2 reasons. First of all, there's the save town center work time, so you never have to interrupt villager creation to get Loom if you're not confident about a boar lure. Since it takes the same amount of time at the town center to research as it does to create a villager, that means you're theoretically a villager ahead as soon as your opponent picks up Loom, which adds up surprisingly quickly if they get Loom early on. Besides that, there's also the saved cost of Loom, which superficially is just 50 gold, so what's the big deal? But it means in Dark Age you can create 5 militia instead of 2 with your starting gold. Other civilizations have to pick up 10 gold in order to do a standard 3 militia rush in the Dark Age, so the Aztecs end up being the top Dark Age rushing civilization, especially once we also factor in their 18% faster working barracks, extra collection rate, and the fact that their Eagle Scout is better at scouting in the Dark Age, which I talked about in the last video, so I won't dwell on that here. So that's all of their bonuses, and now let's move on and take a look at their unique unit, the Jaguar Warrior, or if you're American, the Jaguar Warrior. They cost 60 food and 30 gold, which is a pretty typical price for an infantry unit, and like most infantry, they have a decent attack, pretty low HP, and move relatively slowly. To line them up compared to other infantry units, they lag a bit behind in HP and pierce armor, which makes them particularly vulnerable to archers, so you'll want to pair them with something like Jaguar Warriors or Skirmishers in order to make up for that. To pull back the curtain on some of the more hidden stuff, they also have an attack bonus of plus 10 against infantry, which if you can get your opponent into that matchup means most infantry don't have a chance. They also get a slight plus 2 bonus against buildings, and seem to do an extra 2 damage against Jaguar Warriors, though lots of other infantry units have a bonus against one or both of those things. They're also created in 17 seconds from the castle, which is about the same as swordsman units from the barracks. Taking a look at the elite upgrade, it costs 1000 food and 500 gold, which is enough for about 17 units. It pays off pretty quickly though, and it's definitely worth grabbing since it gives them 50% more HP, along with plus 2 attack and plus 1 melee armor. A question that's popped up a few times in comments is people wondering about how they do against samurai and Teutonic knights. Samurai are of course infantry, so Jaguar Warriors do plus 10 bonus damage against them, but Samurai also have their own attack bonus against unique units, like the Jaguar Warrior. A comparison is pretty straightforward since they cost the same to create, and with their bonuses perfectly balanced, the stats suggest the Jaguar Warrior has the advantage. As it turns out, hidden shenanigans are afoot, and samurai attack significantly faster than the Jaguar Warrior, so this ends up being a good trade for the Japanese. As for the Teutonic Knight, it wins against the Jaguar Warrior one-on-one, but on the other hand, it's a more expensive unit. If we give them both equal gold worth of units, the Aztecs completely dominate, and if we balance them based on total resources spent, the Aztecs still end up winning with about half their Jaguar Warriors left. So I'd say the Aztecs have the edge, even if their units are technically losing one-on-one. So jumping back to the role of the unit, an anti-infantry infantry might seem like a bit of a weird niche, but it's surprising how often that comes in handy. One of the most common ways other players deal with your Eagle Warriors is to make swordsman line units, which Jaguar Warriors are really specialized to handle. Eagle Warriors, for their part, also have the speed and pierce armor to take out any archers, and get a bit of bonus damage against cavalry, so the two units tend to work nicely together and handle lots of different units. The big thing you're really going to struggle to deal with is hand cannoneers though, which unfortunately have a bonus against both of them. Moving on now, we'll take a look at their unique tech, which gives their infantry +4 attack. It costs a pretty reasonable 450 food and a whopping 750 gold, which I think is interesting because it seems to mirror the cost of the halberdier upgrade. That's part of why I think the most interesting aspect of this bonus is asking whether or not it makes up for the Aztecs not having halberdiers. The answer is it kinda depends on what you're fighting. Aztec pikemen are able to take out generic fully upgraded halberdiers, so in terms of a late game trash unit fight, the unique tech ends up giving you some pretty good value. They can even stand up fairly well against Japanese halberdiers, and it's easy to see why. They're doing 2 more damage with every attack and only have 5 less HP. Normally though, you think of the role of pikes as being a counter to cavalry, and that's where the +4 attack certainly doesn't make up for the missing halberdier upgrade. Pikemen have a +22 attack bonus against cavalry, while halberdiers have +32. Aztec pikemen still do okay against paladins and other cavalry, and they're certainly cost effective, but they're not equivalent to halberdiers. So that's the unique unit and unique tech, and now let's take a look at the HD expansion changes. The first update is a bit of a nerf, in that their free Loom bonus changes to simply +50 gold at the start. Now Loom costs 50 gold, so that might sound like it balances out, but this weakens the bonus, because you lose that saved research time, putting you back on even villagers with other civilizations. You still have the potential for extra militia in your rush, but you will have to remember to pick up Loom at some point. The second change to mention is that Aztecs get a new unique tech that gives their skirmishers +1 attack and range. It's pretty cheap at 400 food and 350 gold, and ends up making the Aztecs pretty decent at late game trash battles, since as we just saw, their pikemen also perform quite well against halberdiers. Another big change is the introduction of the Eagle Scout. So that's an extra 400 resources and 50 seconds of research time, plus it's just one more technology you have to remember. Essentially, the Eagle Warrior in the original Conquerors expansion is now the Eagle Scout and available in the Feudal Age with a really slow creation time. And the new Eagle Warrior is a Castle Age variation with stats halfway between the Scout and the Elite Eagle Warrior. The last change to mention is that the Jaguar Warriors now get an extra +1 pierce armor. I kinda like that, and I did find that in the base game, they felt a little bit too weak to archers, which are already a good counter to champions and other infantry, so making the Jaguar Warrior even weaker against ranged units and defensive buildings feels overly punitive sometimes in that matchup, and this just helps bring them up to where other infantry are already at. So now that we've seen the changes, let's take a quick stroll through the tech tree and give out some grades, starting with the archers. The Archer Rush is solid on account of the early economy boost and faster archery range work speed. In the Castle Age, you'll be missing the Thumb Ring and Cavalry Archers, of course, but in the Imperial Age, you do have the Arbalest in order to upgrade any leftover crossbows. As things go on, you'll find you're missing the last armor upgrade and hand cannoneer, so their late game archer options are definitely below average. I'd say it's a B- overall, though it's probably best captured to say it's an A early on and a C in the late game. Next up is infantry, and the big blemish here is the lack of halberdier, which as we've seen against cavalry isn't entirely offset by the extra 4 attack on their pikemen, so they can get overwhelmed. Aside from that though, they have great champions, Eagle Warriors, Jaguar Warriors, and all the blacksmith upgrades. I'd say it's an A-, and it really comes down to how well you can work around the missing halberdier and take advantage of having access to the Eagle Warrior. Next up is the Cavalry, which isn't really applicable here. But one thing I found interesting is in the expansions they do now have stables made for the Mesoamerican civilizations if you play with all techs, which is pretty cool. Moving on though, next up is the Siege. Now the only real bonus here is that they're created faster, though the extra gold from Relics is going to help out subtly as well. There's no bombard cannon, but they do have the Siege Ram and Siege Onager. To me, they're an above average B+, but not a top tier siege civilization. Next up is the Navy. I'd say that the Aztecs have the steepest drop off of all the civilizations on the water as the game progresses. Early on, they're fairly strong, though maybe not as strong as they are on land maps, because a big piece of their feudal economy strength comes from their farming rate bonus, and you probably won't be doing a lot of farming early on if you're going for water and fishing ships. Thanks to the faster galley creation time though, you'll certainly have an edge over some of the other civilizations, so on water maps it's maybe a B+ early on. On the other hand, in the late game, they're the only civilization without the galleon, and managed to miss out on demo ships and cannon galleons entirely. In the Imperial Age, you're basically left with Castle Age war galleys and fast fire ships. I'd say it's an F on the water in the late game because they really aren't viable at that point, for an overall C on the water. Taking a quick look at the monks now, Aztecs are hands down the best monk civilization. All of the monk techs are present and they all give your monks an extra 5 HP as well. You also have the relic bonus to give you an extra incentive to create monks, and to top it all off, they're created faster than anyone else's. It's true they're missing an early gold bonus, but I'm still going to give them an A+ for monks. Moving on now to defenses, there's not too much here to really love. They max out at guard towers and have no bombard towers, hoardings, and not even masonry, which is usually an easy pickup for some cheap extra building armor. They do have fortified walls and a few other defensive techs, but overall I'd say it's a C+. They're certainly a much better fit for an aggressive style of player. Finishing up now on economy, as we saw, the early carry capacity and free loom set up the Aztecs for one of the best economies heading into the feudal age of any civilization. In the late game, they have a bit of help from the extra gold from relics as well, and the carry capacity effect is still going to be present. I'd say overall it's an A for economy. The one weakness I've found is that they're pretty gold dependent through their siege, Eagle Warrior, and monk heavy armies, so it's easy to burn through a lot of gold. But at the same time, the skirmishers are solid, especially in the expansions, and the pikemen actually hold up surprisingly well in trash fights against other halberdiers. So just to end on a few concluding thoughts, I find the Aztecs are really strong in the dark and feudal ages thanks to a great economy, and a strategy of either going for a militia rush or archers both tend to work pretty well. Aztecs do take a bit of adjustment in the Castle Age, I found, because of the lack of knights. I think that's part of a bigger problem for Aztecs in the Castle Age, and there's a window where you're stuck without any cavalry, and your monks and infantry are still average, and I find it can be tough to come up with something strong to do in the Castle Age besides maybe crossbows, but even those are missing thumb ring and don't have any bonuses besides just being made a little bit faster. When you hit the Imperial Age, you can get a bit of momentum back, and the Eagle Warriors have a lot of raiding potential. Their monks' HP starts to accumulate by that point. You get the +4 attack on your infantry, and your siege options all start to open up. So you get a flood of solid units that you can choose from depending on what you're up against. Ideally, it's nice to go for a few of those powerful units mixed in together. But those are my thoughts on the Aztecs. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.